Excellent. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to get us started. So I just first of all wanted to thank everybody for coming. And I know it's a nice day, but thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. My name is Liz Bonventure. I'm the planning director for the town. And a little bit of background on what we do in the planning department. We provide professional assistance to the planning board during construction and permitting, but we also steer the long range planning and zoning policies for the town. And today I have me my planner and development coordinator, Caleb Zimmerman, who works in my office. We have members of the planning board here tonight. We have Jess Sutherland, Barbara LaRue. I see Bill Gaffney here, who's our newest chair, which is exciting. And then we also have our consultant team from VHB. So that consists of Frank DePietro, Krista Magaha, and who else am I missing? I think that's it for now. And Luke Mitchell will be joining us shortly. He is also part of the VHB team. So with that, I'm going to get started with my presentation. Okay. And I would just like confirmation from somebody. Can the group see my screen, and is it big enough?
We can see it.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Barbara. Quickly, we're going to be talking about the MBTA Communities Multifamily Zoning Amendment for the town. So for tonight's agenda, we're going to have a quick introduction to the law, kind of what it is, why it was created, and how it fits into our long-range zoning program, and what the town has been asked to do by the state. We'll discuss what the plan is, the benefits we retain by working with the state on this, and how they pertain to our long-term goals for the town. We'll have a brief panel discussion with community members of different perspectives who all worked on the plan. And finally, we'll open up the discussion with our question and answer session. So thank you. So you can use the Q&A chat function to ask a question anytime during the presentation, and we will answer questions in the order they will receive towards the end of tonight's meeting. So first, we're going to just get an overview of what the law is. So the MBTA Communities Law was endorsed by Charlie Baker in 2020 and passed almost unanimously by the state legislature in 2021. The law states that any municipality within the MBTA catchment area needs to have a zoning district of 50 acres where multifamily housing at a gross density of 15 units per acre is allowed by right. So what by right means is that any developer would be required to apply for site plan approval with the planning board to ensure that the development is complying with all state and local regulations. So to put that into perspective, 15 units per acre is kind of the size of most what you consider a garden apartment. And think about the apartments in the town center as kind of the idea of what that is. And really in its essence, this law is a set of zoning performance standards, that the state is asking municipalities to have. And so, this isn't really unprecedented for the state to do this. We have, the 40B law requires all municipalities have 10% of their housing stock be below market rate. There's also the Dover Amendment, which exempts agricultural, religious, and educational uses from zoning. So again, this type of law is not new. Why is the state pushing this? Why is this, has this been all over the news and, kind of taken over? So, while it sounds like on the surface that this isn't an entirely altruistic effort by the state to provide more housing for citizens, it's really not. At its essence, this is an economic development initiative from the eyes of the state. So according to the census in 2022, 60% of the outward migration from the state was people age 25 to 44. And this population group are people that are highly educated, middle class. They are prime working age and the prime years for forming households, having families, and spending. And the data continues to indicate that the state's workforce has gotten smaller since the pandemic. Much of the reason for this can be attributed to the high cost of living and specifically the high cost of housing. I think that back in 2020 and 2021, the Baker administration was really just looking at the long-term economic projections, if the rate of housing growth remained at its current level, and the numbers are not good. The pandemic really only exacerbated that. With the growth of new remote work opportunities. So new couples looking to put down roots, or new graduates who are coming out of school with lots of debt, are leaving the state and settling where their dollar can go farther. So, while it sounds like, it's a warm and fuzzy law, it's really rooted in long-term economic viability for the Commonwealth. So this law is also not out of keeping with existing long-term planning efforts that the town has done. So the master plan has recommendations that really fall in line with this law. It encourages zoning changes that respond to changing housing needs, providing a broader mix of uses in areas that promote that will enhance the efficient use of the land and support the quality of life for workers in Burlington, so that it is increasingly competitive in attracting and retaining the human resources that are vital to the economic success. It's also not out of line with our housing needs assessment. And so this was completed by the Burlington Housing Partnership with the Metropolitan Area Planning Agency. And they basically state that, diversifying the housing stock for people to live and work in Burlington strengthens the overall economy locally. And then they also, it was very early on, but they also recommended complying with this law. So, takeaways are, this is not an unprecedented law for the state to have, for the state to do, and it's really not out of line with the long-term goals that the town has stated are important. So just, I live in this world, and so, I just wanted to give everybody kind of a snapshot of, what does housing in Burlington look like? The town has 10,000 homes. That includes both for sale and rental. 35% of that is multifamily, and the average rent is $3,000 per month. And we're above the threshold for 40B. We're above our 10%. The graphic on the right displays commuter trends. So Burlington is an employment hub, and the state recognizes that. We have a large number of people coming into the town for work, a smaller number of people who live and work in town, and a large group of residents leaving the town for work. One of the goals, I think, of this initiative and what this law allows us to do is to provide more opportunities for people to both live and work in Burlington. Moving on to schools, this is a hot topic, and it's one of the most common concerns we hear about when discussing housing, the impact on schools. It's one of the largest budget items for most towns, and the belief is that more housing equals more children in the school district. And that might have been the case 20 years ago, but the current data does not support that at all. So Burlington, this is all data from the planning department and recently from the Burlington School District. So Burlington has permitted almost 1,000 units of housing since 2009. And in that time, only 58 new students have enrolled from those new housing units. So you can, the analogy would be that for every 100 units of housing we build, only 6 new students enroll in the Burlington Public Schools. And this was using 2023 enrollment data. So the increase in the number of housing does not correlate with an increase in school age population. And this is not unique to Burlington. This is happening all over the state. So we're on par with the rest of the state on this data. So what do we need to do exactly for this law? So there are 177 MBTA communities that the state has identified, and the state puts each municipality in one of 4 categories. So there's rapid transit communities; those are communities with subway service. Commuter rail communities; they have a commuter rail stop. Adjacent communities, which is what we are; we have bus service only, and then adjacent small towns. So those are small towns that are that the MBTA provides service to, although they might not have a bus line or commuter rail in them. So the other thing that I want to stress and make very clear in this is that the state did not include any language within the law that compels communities to actually construct new housing. It just asks that we have a zoning district in place. And so as an adjacent community, we're required to have at least 50 acres where multifamily is allowed by right at 15 dwelling units per acre. You've heard me say that before. And so 50 acres is less than 2% of Burlington's land area. So it's not a lot of our land. And again, a garden apartment style housing, which is what this law kind of really is asking for, is multifamily housing complexes that are about 3, maybe 4 stories. And the other thing to note is that we need to have this district in to the state for compliance by the end of the year. We're bringing it to town meeting in May, which is unbelievably starting on Monday. I don't think we are going to be on the Monday town meeting, but and it will likely get continued to further days. But we wanted to bring it to May because we wanted to get it voted in. If the state had any notes or concerns or anything needed to be changed, we wanted to be able to have the September town meeting available so that we can make any changes and be compliant by December. I don't think anybody on town meeting wants us to have to call a special town meeting, so that's why we chose May instead of September. And because we're an adjacent community, it also means that we can put zoning wherever we want. There's no requirement to be within a certain distance of a bus line. And so the law really creates a puzzle for each community to solve. And so for us, we have chosen to create an MBT communities zoning overlay district. So we get to choose where that overlay district goes, and I'll go into detail on that in a little bit. In order to solve this puzzle that the state gave us, I created an MBTA communities working group and intentionally invited a diverse group of people with differing interests. The only requirement was that you needed to have a solid understanding of zoning so we could all start out at a basic level. And, while people had differing opinions on the law and strategy, the consensus for the group was really to create a district that would comply with the state law, but also had the greatest chances of passing town meeting. And so that's what we did. So here we go. Here's the zoning overlay district. So an overlay, I'm just going to quickly go over what an overlay district is. So an overlay district is a type of land use zoning district that lies on top of existing zoning. So in this case, a property owner can maintain their existing use, like a retail space or an office space on their property, or they can also choose to utilize the new overlay, which could allow for additional uses like multifamily housing. But where is this district going? You may be asking yourself. And here is the map. So this is the proposed zoning overlay district that we're going to be bringing to town meeting. The red and yellow parcels on the map make up the entire district. And within the overlay, there are 2 sub-districts. There's a garden apartment sub-district in yellow and a mixed-use sub-district in red. The garden apartment sub-district consists of properties with existing garden apartments on them. These properties are in good shape, are unlikely to be redeveloped in 20 years. The town, I've started working here almost 10 years ago, and one of the things that drew me here is that the town has really done a phenomenal job when it comes to creating multifamily housing. The fact that the town's been above its 40B threshold for over 10 years is a testament to what town meeting has done and the select board and people in town. And so, credit should be given where it is due. And this sub-district really achieves that. The mixed-use sub-district, which is the red sub-district, consists of also some existing multifamily properties within the commercial areas of town. But also there's another area for an opportunity for redevelopment. So we're going to go into more detail on each one of these areas. So this is the Beacon Village area. Number one is the Beacon Village Apartments. Area 2 are the condo units at Georgia and Dover Drive. And area 3 is the Westgate apartment condos. It's a portion, and half of those are actually in Woburn. And these developments currently are above 20 units per acre. So let's go back one. So all of these districts are at 20 units per acre. And so what we did was these units are over 20 units per acre, and therefore redevelopment, if redevelopment were to occur in the future, it couldn't be larger than what is currently there. So our proposed district is 20 units an acre. There's more than 20 units per acre on these properties. And so, in 30 years, when Beacon Village, decides that they need to put in a new complex, they can do that, but it can't be bigger than it currently is. The next area is the Heritage at Stone Ridge Apartments, and these are located just off of Wall Street. And they consist, again, of a development above 20 units per acre. And again, redevelopment could not exceed what is currently there. This is getting into the mixed use district. So this is our Lifetime Living building. It's the newest multifamily building in Burlington, and it's located on the corner of 4th Ave and Middlesex Turnpike. This sub-district also allows 20 units per acre by right, but it also allows for a density bonus of 30 units per acre, provided that 15% of the development is set aside for commercial space on the ground floor. And the impetus for that density bonus is to maintain the mixed use character of the district while also maintaining some of the commercial tax base on these properties. As far as this particular property is concerned, it's already over 30 units per acre, so any redevelopment could not exceed what is currently there. Next, we have the Tremont and the Huntington. These two buildings are adjacent to Wegmans, and as with the previous property, development couldn't really exceed what is currently there. And next, we have what we're calling the Staples Commercial District. So these are a grouping of parcels that are between Middlesex Turnpike and Great Meadow Road, beginning at the Staples building, where Staples is itself, and continues north until Meadow Road meets Middlesex Turnpike. The working group chose this area because there was a concern that only using existing multifamily in the overlay district wasn't really meeting the spirit of the law, and then could put us at risk for compliance with the state. Therefore, the consensus was to really use this area. And, this area is actually a really ideal location for multifamily for lots of reasons. It's adjacent to employment centers at Northwest Park. It's within walking distance to Wegmans, the district, the MBTA bus line, and LRTA bus lines by Wegmans on 3rd Ave. And because of all the nearby amenities, as a resident, you could theoretically live here without a car, and utilize Uber and Lyft for all your longer drives. The properties, as they currently have outlived their useful lives. So if you look on the right side of the screen, you can see that they are definitely older buildings. A lot of them have for lease signs on them, and they're at least 30 years old. So providing an opportunity like this, we felt like this was an area that we could help revitalize. And why are we bothering to comply? So there's lots of reasons. The first is that one of the things the state has said is that, if a municipality doesn't comply with the law, we would not be eligible for lucrative grant funding from the state that we have historically utilized and have relied on. So one of the biggest is the MassWorks grants, the Local Capital Projects Fund, and Housing Choice Initiative. So, just some of the high level projects. So the signalization at 3rd and 4th Ave was funded in part public-private partnership through the MassWorks grant funding. So that was $3 million. The connection to the MWRA as a drinking water source was $4 million. That was the most recent MassWorks grant that we got. And one of the things that the state told us was that one of the reasons we received that grant funding, we were one of the highest recipients for grant funding in that round, was because we are an employment center and we've done such a good job with allowing multifamily housing in town. Also, back a while ago, we did a redesign of Middlesex Turnpike from 128 to Lexington, if you remember that, and kind of realigning that. And so that was all paid for with MassWorks. And so this is a slide that gets more into detail, but we have historically utilized this grant funding for large, basically large infrastructure projects that would otherwise need to go to town meeting to get done. And so it allows us to be more agile. I'd also just like to talk about some things that, us in the planning department would like to use grant funding for. So we have a lot of things that we're currently working on that, we would need to see kind of unavailable to us. So I'm currently working with our economic development director, and we've applied for a Mass Trails grant to look at connecting Burlington to the Minuteman Bikeway, either through Lexington or Bedford, to give people a different option to get into Burlington and for recreation for our current residents. We need to update our wireless bylaws. They haven't been updated since the 90s, and so we would need to get consulting services for that. And the other thing that I'm really would love to be able to do is to look at our town center overlay and kind of re-examine it. And kind of look at maybe updating it for the future. I can also tell you, in reaching out to other departments, again, the DPW uses this money a lot for large infrastructure projects. So, this is just a kind of a list. There's still more money that we need to kind of absolutely finalize on WRA. We want to do some energy upgrades at Town Hall. And, this is all coinciding with a lot of major facilities projects that we are having to deal with. Kind of everything is happening all at once, as it sometimes does. We need a new police station. There's new schools that need to be paid for, and so having this as a source of money that is outside the town budget is really important for the town to provide the kind of services to the residents that we have in the past and would like to do in the future. So I just wanted to make that important point. And so with that is kind of the end of my presentation at this point. And again, if you're interested in asking any questions, please use the Q&A function. But I think now we're going to go ahead and get into the portion where we're going to do a panel discussion. So let me grab my questions and then we can get started. Let's see. So here we go. So the first thing I would like to do is I would like to introduce my panel. So I recruited a group of people who have different views on things and I think can add a little more insight into the process. So first on the panel, I have Barbara LaRue, who's been on the planning board for many, many years. And she was formerly the chair of the planning board, but she has been on the board for at least 10 years, at least since I've known her. She has grown up in Burlington and currently resides in Burlington. We have Jess Sutherland, who is a newer member of the planning board. She is our newest vice chair and has a young family in town. And did not grow up here. So she has kind of an outside perspective on the town, which I think is unique. I also have Rick Parker with me, who is the head of the Burlington Area Chamber of Commerce. And he's very active in the community and has been working for years and years, former town meeting member. And so, I know that we collaborate really well on different economic development projects. And then we have Bob Buckley with us. He is an attorney with Reamer and Braunstein. They do a lot of local permitting in town for the town of Burlington, but they also do permitting in other communities. And so his perspective, provides both the financial side, the permitting side, as well as kind of what other communities are doing with this process and how they're handling it. And so I just wanted to start out by asking the group, I mentioned previously in my presentation that there have been a lot of media outlets that have been stating that, professionals and families are leaving the state due to the high cost of living and the high cost of housing that's available. So what are your thoughts on this trend, and what could this mean for Burlington and the region?
Do you want me to start?
Sure, whoever wants to, go ahead.
Hi, this is Bob Buckley. I would say that 20 years ago, there was a real push when client or potential clients or national businesses would call and say, we'd like to be in Burlington. Um, that was the drawing card. What I see now is I don't get that question anymore. The first question I get here, as well as other municipalities, my practice is pretty much Eastern Massachusetts, is what's the housing situation? Do you have housing? Because the reality of the game today is companies are investing substantial sums of money, and their principal asset, besides their idea, their product, is their human capital. And the workforce and the talented workforce wants to be able to live in the area where they work. So the first question that I oftentimes face is, what's the housing situation in the Burlington market or other markets? But Burlington has traditionally been very proactive, and I'd like to comment to you on, or compliment the town on that. Historically, Burlington has been the head of the curve, and I think that's one of the reasons the state has traditionally been very receptive to financial requests, which also reflects the thought process that went into choosing um, the zones that the overlay zones, because in my opinion, one of the major flaws, other than the major flaw of the law, which is it doesn't require the building of housing, one of the major flaws is that it doesn't give recognition that those communities over the last 10, 15, 20 years have been proactive in developing housing. And Burlington has been one of the leaders in that domain. And as a result, um, discounting the economic conditions in the world today, Burlington has always been a leader in attracting highly educated and talented people to work here, which has resulted in a very solid and diverse economic base. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, Rick, go ahead. Of course.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about the outflux of people leaving the state. There's a lot of discussion politically, and some people say if I don't see it, it's not happening. This is the number one problem facing the state right now. We've been known for our economic institutions in really helping educate people and developing that next workforce. Unfortunately, the word has gotten out, and there are states like North Carolina that put recruiters on these campuses, and they talk to them because the people that are graduating now have historic debt. And it's really easy to tell someone, coming out of school, sure, you can stay in the Boston area, but you'll never pay down that debt, and you'll be living in an apartment with 4 of your friends for most of your life. And then meanwhile, other people are telling, come to North Carolina, come to Ohio, come to Texas, and we can help you pay down that school debt. You'll make pretty much the same money, but the cost of housing is significantly less. When these young people leave and start a family, they're not coming back. And I think we know, those of us that have lived in town all of our lives, and we talk to our friends, how many of our children have gone on to school and graduated, have good jobs, high-paying jobs, but the thought of living in Burlington is beyond their scope. So I do think if anyone thinks that we don't have a problem with people leaving the state, please think again.
And Barbara, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this from a more Burlington perspective, and I think Burlington actually is particularly vulnerable to this trend of young qualified professionals leaving, because when you think of Burlington, yes, we have an excellent business community and we have really strong, big, large businesses, lots of lab businesses, but we also have shopping and we also have restaurants. That's what we're known for. But who's shopping and who's eating in those restaurants? It's the business people who come here every day. When they leave, the shopping and the dining also goes away. And so we have built something really good here, but it's a little, it's standing on three legs, right? And if one of them falls, they all fall. The other thing that I think is good about this is Burlington has done a really, really good job providing multifamily housing in town, but the rest of the state hasn't. Many towns haven't, but this law applies across the board to 177 or so communities. Until the state as a whole starts working on this, prices are not going to come down. It's not enough for one town over here and one town over there to do a good job on multifamily housing. We all have to do it statewide, or it's not going to have any impact on housing prices. So that's all.
Thanks, Barb.
I'd like to just add to that. As someone who sits in this key demographic and as someone who, for a living, studies and understands behavior in these generational shifts, I know that it is an extremely delicate ecosystem. For Burlington, we've really built keeping in mind traditional or nuclear households, but the key working force, those 25 to 49 years old, are actually having less kids. I actually looked it up. According to census data, 43% of U.S. households are child-free, which is a 7% increase from a decade ago. And Boston is the 5th most childless major city in the U.S. This trend is happening for financial reasons, as well as just honestly flexibility in life reasons. This generation wants more freedom, and they want to be located where there's connectivity. I think what is interesting about the connectivity piece is it's something that those in the younger part of this bracket who eventually do want kids are also looking for connectivity, culture, diversity. But to have those services and spaces, we need to continue to create and foster connectivity, culture. We need to attract a variety of businesses, which is also good for stability. But this means we also have to have the employees for services or businesses that aren't paying large wages. And to have that, we need higher density housing. We don't have enough high density housing or transportation. And contrary to popular belief, Burlington is not the field of dreams. Just because we build it doesn't mean they're going to come. I think you can ask any landlord with an empty office space right now. I think the good news is that connectivity and continuing to invest in availability of housing is a very serious focus for us. But I think it's time that this focus is escalated. And on top of that, as a town, we really show our desire to adapt to these changing needs. Because like Barbara said, there's so many towns in the state that are having to adopt this, but what businesses and as well as that generation is going to be looking at is who is adapting, who is willing to change, who is willing to allow for this connectivity and this housing, and that's where they're going to go. So I think I think the need for it is just escalating at this point.
There's also a subset of benefits to the town that, and I admit that this is an economic development driven statute, and it should be, because as everyone has attested to, there is a drain of talent leaving for any number of reasons, but it is leaving. But if you have this housing and you have someone who's a lifetime resident of Burlington who decides that they've made a tremendous investment, their property values have gone up, and they'd like to stay here and sell their house because they can't maintain it, because it's so expensive, they'll sell it, they'll get a great nest egg or perhaps gain. But if they want to stay in this community, that gain is going to be eaten up by buying other product. So if you create rental housing here, that they can take that nest egg and support living in the community where they've resided all their life, because they can now afford the rent because they've created that nest egg and they're going to invest it in that manner, and worry-free housing. That frees up housing for those people who you want to then become part of your community, because there'll be single-family homes available for those people to roll out of perhaps this environment and then become parts of the community. So it is a cyclical type of an arrangement. And frankly, that's what companies are looking for. As Barbara indicated, you have a tremendous amenity load here. We have offices across the country and we pay a decent starting wage. Not when I started out, but very high. And they'd rather live in, surprisingly, Chicago, in that area, because Chicago's done a much better job We have an office in Chicago. They've done a much better job of providing diverse housing alternatives for people, and that all goes a lot further there than it does here. So it is critical, but the communities that have been proactive have to be recognized. So I do think the way that Burlington has addressed it by putting it on many projects that have been developed in the last decade is a way of achieving recognition for what you've done. And it isn't compliant with the law, and yet you've supplemented that by taking unperforming property and said, you know, this might be an area that is ideal for future development of new housing stock.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, Bob, you kind of hit the nail on the head with something that, I think about a lot. And that is, the life cycle of housing, and how one of the biggest problems is that in this state, it's broken. You can't downsize. You can't increase the size of your house. Once you are kind of where you are, you're kind of stuck. And so that is something that I think that we need to be working on as a state as a whole. And I think that's kind of what the state is trying to help address through this law. And so I'm going to move on to my next question. And I think you guys have kind of addressed this. The town of Burlington currently has, millions of square feet of office space and in its commercial core. And that actually contributes almost 60% of the town's tax base. So it's a huge chunk of the town's tax base. So, from your perspective, how has the workforce changed post-pandemic? And, what things do you guys feel like Burlington can do to remain agile for both employers, employees, and people who really live here?
Liz, I'd like to take the first part of that question. How has the workforce changed? I think with work from home, everybody, as you remember during the pandemic, everybody kind of had a reevaluation of that work-life balance. They're working home, they were seeing their kids when maybe they hadn't seen them before. They had more flexibility. That has brought a new perspective. The thought of people, getting back in a car for maybe an hour and a half each way is totally out of the question now. So Burlington being a car-dependent community, that has put us off the map with the employee. Never mind the employer. The employer right now, when we're talking about the lack of workforce, the employer is going where the employees are or where the employees want to be. Burlington has done a really good job in the past 10 years in being an amenity-rich thing that kept the businesses here. Unfortunately, a lot of that was based in software and the office market, which has been changed dramatically due to the pandemic. And as employers have looked to get their employees back on site, they're finding that many of their employees don't live in the state anymore, and remote is the only option. However, as we're looking towards industries like life sciences, those are not work from home, but these people don't live close enough and they aren't going to get back in that car. So the workforce has changed dramatically. And businesses are going where the workers are or where the workers are willing to go to.
Yeah, and there are a lot of industry or individuals in the marketplace that, despite what you read in terms of the glut on the market of lab space, there are a number of entities that are looking for quality research and development lab space. And an industry that is very hot in this area that's also not talked about is cybersecurity. You have Hanscom, you have a number of research institutions around here, and that's becoming a very, very prominent employer in this area. And as Rick said, that does not lend itself to working from home. So I think that Burlington is in a good position, or this whole region is in a good position from that standpoint. The problem is that there has become, not a problem, but an issue that has come to the surface is the young employees are focused on work-life balance. And so the days of grind up the young employee and have them work, they want to be able to live and work within an area. I think there's a stat that we talked about the other day that There's a high percentage of the ones who live in multifamily housing in Burlington that work within 3 or 4 miles of their location, which is a phenomenal stat.
Yeah, I think it was something like 73% live within Middlesex 3.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to what Bob was saying, I think it's why the stat about the number of 25 to 49-year-olds leaving the state is such a massive issue, because I think also folks are forgetting that historically and traditionally baby boomers have made up a third of the workforce, and with 4 million baby boomers leaving the workforce every year, as well as companies reducing workforces to cut costs, I mean, with this influx of people leaving, which I found out was aptly named the silver tsunami, the need and the desire to attract that younger talent pool. I mean, like everyone has said, the employers are going to go where they are. And so that's why it's even exasperated of why attracting those people to be in and around or directly in your area is so important. I mean, we have the Northeastern Innovation Campus here. So really setting ourselves up to continue to give them those reasons to stay here, you know, whether it be the inventory or the connectivity is really important. And I think from the planning side, we have a lot of low-hanging fruit that I think we can do to attract, especially the businesses that those folks are going to be looking for. You know, I think we can look at that pretty quickly in terms of reducing the complexity, trying to make the process less expensive. And I think from a longer range standpoint, there's a lot we can do with incentives for multi-use building, and really allowing smaller businesses to come into town while trying to balance that tax basis for commercial versus residential.
But Jess, see what we've been talking about? It's housing, but it translates into economic development.
Yes.
I mean, and if people have been reading the press, UMass Lowell has just announced a $1 billion expansion of their high-tech, climate-oriented research. They're going to have a campus, and met with them on that, and they're going to be looking for space. These companies are going to be developing new concepts and new designs and new industries, and they'll be looking for space, which will hopefully put productivity back into existing buildings that heretofore may have outlived their usefulness. And also, they're attracting worldwide talent that are going to need places to live. So while it's an economic, while it's a housing initiative, it has economic ramifications.
Yeah, and Bob, you mentioned in the news, you know, I think we see these communities that may be going up against the MBTA Communities Act. They have little to fear. They're not going to lose their tax grants, and they're not going to lose their commercial business because they don't have it. A community like Burlington is so dependent on and in harmony with the business community. This is a big deal. And we can't afford to lose that tax revenue from the business community. And we also can't take losing the grant funding as well. It's a supplemental feature to our budget, and it's critical to us.
I know at the chamber we had this discussion, Rick. Hopefully this will pass for any number of reasons. But even if it passes, it would be my hope that the town continues to be proactive on creating housing.
I agree with you both. I think the town does need to do more in terms of housing. One of the very fair criticisms that I'm kind of jumping ahead, I think, in our discussion, but one of the fair criticisms about the plan that we're putting forward is that it doesn't go far enough, that it doesn't create enough opportunities for housing. And I agree with that. And the planning department is going to be putting forward additional housing plans coming forward in September and possibly in January, because we do believe there's a greater need for housing. We want to do it in a very targeted manner. But I think the other thing that, going back to what Rick was talking about, I have heard from some members of the community that we should do what Milton is doing. We should do what Rockport is doing. But Burlington is very different than those towns. Burlington really has nothing to lose by complying. And we have everything to gain. And if at some point in the future, those communities prevail in court and the law is struck down, which I'm not sure that would be a good thing, but if it did happen, we could benefit from, if we wanted to, we could benefit from the legal fight that Milton and Rockport paid for. There's no reason for us to pay for that ourselves. But like I said, the plan that we put forward will have little or no impact on the community. And in fact, it's really just a small portion of the housing that we're going to need to produce in the future.
Barbara, there's nothing wrong with paying legal fees. Don't ever say that. I agree with that. And as I said, Burlington is being very creative by the two problems I have with the law is that it doesn't mandate construction,
Mhm.
and it doesn't give recognition for those communities that have been proactive. And what you're putting forward does both. You're taking credit for what you've done, and you're also reserving space to enhance construction of new housing. I think that there are numerous other housing alternatives that should be explored. Transitional housing, targeted senior housing, which is going to be the next wave of issues that this Commonwealth faces. But Burlington has always been at the front of the pack. And all you have to do is look at the companies that reside here, and then even the ones you don't even know about that are doing phenomenal research here. It's an incredible mecca of activity, and it's the economic engine for the Middlesex 3 corridor.
Mhm.
I would
And
agree
so-
with that, Bob. And I think to kind of take it to the next level, and I agree and understand why people are saying we're not doing enough. But the issue is that the law doesn't allow us to do age restricted. And knowing that we really want to be able to support, the different community needs, we want to be able to be very purposeful in doing that. And that is something we very much are planning to do. And so I hear and I agree, it's not doing enough, but that doesn't mean the buck stops here. This is just a fraction of the beginning of kind of setting ourselves up for what we need.
Jess, you're absolutely right that the law doesn't permit the variety of types of housing that is needed. But Burlington has a voice, and Burlington has been a leader in, driving the debate. And as I tell people who work for me, if the law doesn't achieve the policy that it should, maybe we change the law. So I think that, that we look at it and say, okay, how do we make this all interconnect and work? And it may require some fine tuning of the law. And I'd be a participant in advocating for that because it is in all of our long-term interests. And one other thing that in a number of other communities, and I've actually been involved representing projects and overlays in other communities, a lot of people say, well, this is the state forcing something down our throat that we don't want. This is a state overriding home rule. Liz touched upon this in the beginning. Look at zoning in Massachusetts. A lot of it is mandated between 40B projects, 40A, and special permits, what you can and cannot condition. The statutes are replete with the state saying you can and cannot do this through your zoning act. So this is not a novel approach. I do think that's a loser from a legal argument. I do think that policy issues are somewhat weak.
Adding on to what Bob was saying, I've heard that argument a lot as well. How dare the state tell us what to do? And if I thought the state was trying to tell us to do something that was bad for Burlington, I would say that. But I don't. I think this is what we need. I think that's what all of us need. So it's kind of like, a child that doesn't want to eat his vegetables. How dare mommy tell me to eat my vegetables? But it is what's good for the kid, and it's good. This is what's good for us. It is good for the state, and it's good for Burlington. And so there's really no reason to try not to comply. It's to our benefit.
Thank you so much, guys. So I was going to ask you a third question, but you guys kind of already covered it, which was fantastic. So again, I just wanted to thank you guys for joining us and being on the panel, and we're going to open it up to Q&A. And so if you guys would like to hang around for that, that would be fantastic. And so Matt Hogan, who is kind of in charge of this, managing the meeting for us today, I think we're going to get started with Q&A. So if anybody who is here has any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. And so I'm going to start out quickly. I have 2 questions in the Q&A chat. So one of the questions is in Area 5, which I believe you're referring to the Staples Plaza, or the Staples area, Staples Commercial District. The question is, what are the restrictions for building? So I think what you're getting at is what we would call dimensional requirements. And so it is 15 units, or it's actually 20 units per acre with that density bonus. And what you can build is essentially a 3 or 4-story building on that property. And with that, any redevelopment, again, would need to comply with our zoning bylaw, which has its own set of restrictions in it regarding stormwater. And we would, any type of development, we would add new sidewalks and, all sorts of things of that nature. So I hope that answers that question. And then another question following up that you did, so you basically asked what are some reasons that towns have been voting it down, regardless of what they have to lose in doing so. So in Milton's case specifically, I can speak to that. And in Milton's case, they actually, town meeting passed the overlay district that they had proposed. So it originally did pass. And then the people in Milton voted to repeal it. So town meeting did what they were supposed to, and the people in town repealed it on the basis that they didn't believe that Milton should be considered a rapid transit community. Because again, there are those 4 different types of towns, and rapid transit communities have the highest level of requirements. You need to be within a certain distance of that rapid transit stop. And they have what's the Mattapan trolley, which is called the Mattapan High Speed Line, which goes along their border with Boston. So therefore they were considered rapid transit. And so that is what they are basically contesting, is their categorization by the state. They don't feel that the Mattapan trolley should be categorized as rapid transit. As far as Rockport is concerned, I believe that it did pass their town. I could be wrong. I believe it did pass their town meeting, but there are residents that are specifically outside the town are filing a suit against the state for this. And so that will be going ahead. Back to Milton, they will be heard at the SJC, so that's the Supreme Court of Massachusetts, in the fall. So we won't hear about that until the fall. And other communities, I think a lot of other communities have brought this to town meeting that have voted it down. There actually aren't a lot. I think there's only 4. There's only 4 places that really haven't voted it down or have had some problem with compliance. And I think there's at least 50 communities that have all either already complied or that are in the process of compliance. So there are some towns where town meeting didn't approve it. I think Wakefield, and then there's another town, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that those are commuter rail communities, which we are not. And so those communities have very specific restrictions on where this district can be located. And so I think that was a lot of the reason for those municipalities having a hard time with the vote. And I think, Barbara, you wanted to add to that, if I'm not mistaken.
I just wanted to add that for many of these other communities, They haven't done the work that Burlington has done in the past. So it's much harder for them to comply than it is for us to comply. You can see the map that we put forward. We're taking credit for the work that we already did. If we didn't have any multifamily housing in town or had very little, it would be very difficult to comply with this law. For us, it's easy. For some of these towns, it is really a very heavy lift. So that's why they're fighting it. It's harder for them.
So if you build up that, Barbara, the question then becomes, why wouldn't you approve this? Because look at the funding you'll be in line for, and you'll be at the front of the line, and you're really not altering the lifestyle in this community. I mean, there's only one parcel that is new development, and I would differ with Liz that while I understand the right criteria you put in for dimensional requirements, I think it's difficult to build something that economically is sustainable with those requirements. So you're not altering your lifestyle in this community, but it's a fundamental issue. You should get credit for being proactive. The communities that all of a sudden have to build hundreds and hundreds of units and they don't have the commercial base, they're having a difficult time figuring out how they're going to comply. But shame on them, they haven't done anything in years.
So one of the questions to follow up on that, Bob, so when you say, talk about economic viability, is that current economic viability? 5 years ago, would it have been economically viable to do this? Is that just kind of your understanding of the market right now?
The land is difficult. I mean, that would be a very difficult site to develop. I think it is an ideal site, and it might be an ideal site that you could, on paper, do 20 units per acre, and therefore you're in compliance with the law. But the product that you may want to do may differ than the product that is ultimately built there. There's no requirement you have to build to 20. As I said, there's no requirement you build at all. But I think that you're going to have to be creative with that site and look at it, because it screams to have parking underneath, which means you're cutting in, and it's a narrow site, so it limits your ability to do a lot of things there. Plus, you have all sorts of restrictions surrounding it in terms of floodplain and all the other nice things that you do when you develop property. So, but I think that's brilliant, because it does require someone to look at it and be creative and say, what can we do here? You've complied with it by the dimensional, but when someone goes to build, they're going to have to sharpen their pencil and figure out how we make this work.
Yeah, and just to kind of
clarify.
No, not at all. And just to clarify for people who aren't super familiar with this, so when you're on Meadow Road, you're down here. When you're on Middlesex Turnpike, you're up here. And so when somebody is looking to develop that site, they have to figure out that topography and how any type of new building would fit on that site. And they also have to meet parking requirements and setback requirements. So, again, it's another puzzle that, developers are going to have to be
encouraging someone to design something that you'll support to solve that puzzle, which I think is a very effective way of doing planning. You're just not doing a blanket saying 20 units an acre, go for it. You're saying, yeah, on paper you could do that, but we're going to demand how you put this together, and it's going to therefore require, while it says as of right, we're going to have to work together, whoever does it, and say, how do you build this and make it work? Which is, you're forcing people to be creative, and that's not bad.
I agree, Bob. Thank you for that perspective. So those are the two questions that I had from Phyllis in our chat. I was also hoping, if anybody else in the meeting has any other questions, please raise your hand. If there's comments or concerns, things you've heard. Barbara, you had a question.
There is another question in the chat.
Oh, excellent.
There's a new one.
Fantastic. Okay. And so, so this is from Andrea Tracy. She spent time with Lacey. She spent time at Leahy Hospital, chatted with staff. She said that many of them grew up in the Woburn area, but had to move to Merrimack, New Hampshire to afford a house. why couldn't we give some credits for rents for Leahy, Burlington area employment? And this is actually a very excellent point. So one of the things that that I've heard, and I know that the chamber has heard as far as government affairs, is that again, Leahy, which is a huge hospital and a huge hospital system, you know, and is actually the highest employer in the town. They are having trouble finding and retaining talent. And again, you know, you think of a hospital, you think of people with six-figure salaries that are, you know, going to be able to afford whatever they want. They're all doctors, blah, blah, blah. You know, I think 70% of the people at Leahy are nurses or they're attendants, or, you know, they're not people that are doctors. And so, you know, it's a huge employment center, but you know, not everybody is able to really get their foot in the door in Burlington, and they do have to commute. And so one thing I can say, and this brings me up to another point about this district, is that the town of Burlington currently has an inclusionary zoning bylaw. And what that means is that any multifamily development in the town that is, I think, 4 or more units needs to have 15% of that development as dedicated multifamily or dedicated affordable housing. And so as part of this new overlay, I have chatted with our town council, and the way that the new overlay district bylaw is written, that inclusionary zoning requirement would also be required in this district. So anything that gets built will need to have 15% of the units be affordable, and those are deed restricted affordable units. So
can I comment on that? You're making a very valid point. If you pass the MBTA communities, you'll be in compliance without really changing the character of the area. You'll be eligible for state funding, when some communities are not, because the only way they're going to be able to enforce this is to shut them off. That may be maybe more money in the bucket you'll have for a stibs at. You've been proactive on affordable housing, and you've 12.7%? So you do not have to fear an unfriendly 40B, someone coming into your community doing something that you don't want. For those that can remember the land swap, that was an endeavor to prevent that being built in the middle of where the Grandview Farm is right now, was going to be a 40B project. Look at all those assets. You've got money, compliance, no fear of 40Bs. It's a challenge to everyone on this call over the next decade to come up with creative, innovative housing that not only satisfy the employee demands, the residents' demands, those who want to age in place and stay in the community where their doctors and friends are. You have all the variables in an equation. Why wouldn't you grab this and say, what can we do to make this even a better place to live? I don't live here, but I look at it, you have all the ingredients. So there's your challenge, Liz. Good luck.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate it. So anybody else who is here, you can raise your hand, ask questions, and we can unmute you. You can ask yourself, or you can add to the chat for the meeting. You know, I think that we are competing with the weather outside today. It's beautiful. But you know, if there are no other questions, I wanted to share my screen once more, where you can find out more information about this initiative. And so, for those of you who are interested, that the planning department has a dedicated webpage for this initiative. And I'm trying to scroll to get to that slide, so bear with me, thank you. So where you can learn more, there's also a story map, which provides more information about this initiative. So I'm going to show that on the screen so that everybody can get a copy of that QR code. And you know, I just really wanted to thank everybody for attending, and thank you, BCAT, for covering us. And I think this was really helpful. I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do this. And with that, I'm gonna wish everybody hope everybody has a good night.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you
you, Liz, for the
guys.
hard work.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Liz.